Hi everyone! Our second module is about equitable teaching. This first video will cover equity pedagogy and the hidden curriculum. Let's start with our goals and objectives. By the end of this module, you'll be able to articulate the differences between equity, accessibility, and inclusion in teaching, identify barriers to equity, accessibility, and inclusion in your classroom, and start thinking about ways to minimize them, and start interrogating the hidden curriculum in classics or your other courses. Let's get started. So first we have to consider, what is equity? What is equitable teaching? So when we're talking about equitable teaching, you may have seen an image like this before. So the difference between equality and equity, right? Equality is providing the same resources to every person, regardless of their needs, whereas equity is responding to the needs of each individual. And that's what we need to do to build equity into our courses. We need to respond to individual student needs, which means we need to get to know our students and their needs, which we won't always necessarily be able to predict in advance. And to do this, we often need to work with our institutional resources like disability services or centers for teaching and learning, whatever you have at your disposal. One of the things that this requires of us as educators is that we step outside of ourselves and think about and interrogate our own privileges and biases, things that we wouldn't have thought of before, needs that we wouldn't have thought of before, and also that we listen to our students when they ask us for things and don't dismiss them. So for example, one of the things that I didn't know about one of my students and she didn't bring up until probably about halfway through the semester was I had a student with a visual impairment who couldn't read the handouts I was giving because the font size was too small. And it was an easy fix, right? It was something I could do that was very easy, just increase the font size. But I didn't know that until I sat down and listened to her and saw what she was dealing with and thought beyond kind of my own experience as a sighted person. So that's equitable teaching, but what about inclusive or accessible teaching? So to build inclusivity and accessibility into our courses, we need to lower the barriers to learning for all students, regardless of their expressed or individual need. So this doesn't quite fit into this image that we see over here. So we talked about the difference between equality and equity. So equality would be providing equal resources to each person. Equity would be providing resources to each according to their need. But one of the things that we want to do to increase inclusivity and accessibility in our courses would be to just knock down the fence, to try to lower that barrier to learning for everybody, regardless of expressed need. So the thing we need to do in order to do this is to think even more outside ourselves and think outside the expressed interest of our students, and consider structural, pedagogical, logistical, or other barriers to creating an equitable learning environment, and do our best to eliminate them and or help students manage them when there's nothing we can do about them. And one of the ways that I think it's really important for us to kind of think about this macro scale of inclusivity is to think about the hidden curriculum. So what I mean by the hidden curriculum is a systemic issue that refers to the implicit lessons we teach our students about our academic, social, and cultural values. Hidden learning objectives may include unspoken expectations for student performance, coming to office hours, for example, the knowledge of academic or field-specific rules or norms, knowing what office hours are and what they're for, or messages about who or what is worthy of academic study and who is welcome or capable to pursue this academic study. And this is one of the things that I think we've seen in current discourses about the field of classics that people are really starting to think about in our particular field. So let's talk about the dangers of the hidden curriculum. What happens when we leave these messages unsaid? Well, the biggest is bias in educational opportunities and outcomes for students of marginalized groups, especially if we leave these messages unexamined and unacknowledged. So to continue using the office hours example, I was a first-generation college student. I had no idea that office hours were something I was supposed to go to. I never went to office hours as an undergrad, not until I was kind of advanced in time and wanted to go to grad school, and then realized that I didn't have anybody to write letters for me. So one of the things that I had to have explained to me by another student who he came from a more privileged background, who had office hours as kind of a regular feature of their high school environment, is that this is something I was supposed to do, to go and build relationships with faculty, that was something that was on me as a student to figure out how to do. So one of the things that this creates is kind of an imbalance, right? Where more privileged students understand these hidden expectations, and less privileged students from more marginalized groups don't. So it's up to us to examine and acknowledge those things in our classrooms and help obviate them. The other thing that the hidden curriculum results in is ineffective teaching methods. If half of the class doesn't understand that, my expectations, the things that I'm trying to teach them I'm not going to be able to teach them as effectively. This also results in student disaffection and dissatisfaction, where students start to feel like they've been left behind. I think we can all understand how that would be very dissatisfying and frustrating and lead to a lack of motivation. And one of the most pernicious dangers about the hidden curriculum is that it's impossible to fully eliminate. As much as we would like to be able to see everything from our students' perspectives, sometimes it's just not possible, and I don't know what they don't know about my field or about my course or about academia in general, in order to kind of fully explain that. So what do? If we can't eliminate the hidden curriculum, how do we minimize its effects? And the first thing is research. This is something we all love to do as academics. Think about ways that you can expose yourself to other people's experience. And I've suggested some things in the suggested resources in this module. But we can also do what we're doing right now, self-reflection and discussion with other educators to examine our inherent biases, the inherent biases of academia, of our fields, and of our own teaching practices. We can also engage with our students in a kind of transparent manner and emphasizing clarity and transparency in all our communications with students, including clear course expectations and objectives that are aligned with our instruction and our assessment. So for reminders about that, that was all the subject of Module 1. And the other thing that we can do is try to strike a balance between structure and flexibility in course design. And that's the final thing I'm going to talk about right now. So talking about design balance. So what we talk about when we mean high course structure is very clear expectations and objectives. One of the things that we know from a variety of studies done is that increased course structure increases more positive outcomes for students from marginalized groups. Sometimes doubling the number of A's, let's say, amongst first-generation college students when we just add more structure to a class. So what does that mean? That means having clear expectations and objectives from the very beginning, letting your students know at every point in the course what we're doing and why we're doing it. So if you expect students to come to office hours, explaining to them what office hours are, explaining things like what a syllabus is, and what it's for, rather than just being frustrated that the students don't read the syllabus. And when it comes to things like assessments, think about rubrics and modeling. How can we model for our students what it is that they're supposed to be doing, rather than kind of leaving it to them to decide what they think is an argumentative essay? Explaining that to them, the different elements of that and why they're there and how to achieve them. And then finally, as I said, transparency, right? I really like to explain to my students, especially if I'm doing some sort of pedagogical experiment, right? Like, we're going to try this and see if it works. And here's the point of doing this. And I want you to talk back to me about it. Tell me what's working and what's not, so we can kind of work on it together. So that level of transparency in your pedagogy and in your course structure, so that students don't ever feel like what they're doing is busy work, right? So that students always understand the point of what they're doing and what it's supposed to be helping them achieve. So taking that increased course structure with those clear expectations and objectives, always showing students how and why what they're doing is going to lead to a positive result, and balancing that alongside flexibility. So noting that students are all coming to us from different contexts and with different experiences and backgrounds. So I think flexible policies and deadlines is probably something we all thought about this past year in the pandemic environment. But one of the things we really have to do is make those things really clear and transparent to our students. So if your syllabus says that you'll take a half point off for every day a paper is late, but then you don't actually do that. One of the things that this does is it penalizes students who are less likely to ask for that extension. It penalizes the student who, stayed up all night or skipped a work shift in order to finish the paper, as opposed by Friday night rather than just turn it in on Saturday. So creating those flexible policies and deadlines that are transparent with our students so they understand the flexibility inherent, what is flexible and what is not. Another element of flexibility is increasing student choice so that students can avoid activities that may not be accessible for them, or can choose to pursue activities or assignments that they feel best exemplify what they've learned and can best show off to you what they've learned. And then finally, an important part of all equitable pedagogy, keeping open those lines of communication so that students feel like they can reach out to you and let you know if and when there's a problem. Okay. In the next video, Amy's going to discuss more ways to build inclusivity and accessibility into your courses using universal design for learning. See you later.